On the morning of Tuesday, November 11th, 2024, just after 10 a.m., Birmingham Airport looked like any other busy hub on an ordinary day. Flights touched down, luggage tumbled onto carousels, and families drifted through arrivals with that familiar mix of relief and exhaustion. Nothing about the scene suggested that, behind the calm movement of travelers and suitcases, three very different criminal stories were about to collide in the same place. In that arrivals hall, among the tired holidaymakers and business passengers, a mother was quietly directing her own children as part of an international drug plot. Elsewhere, a dealer's careless decision at an airport checkpoint had already begun to unravel a secret stash of drugs, weapons, and dirty cash. And somewhere along the same chain of security checks, a man believed he could push a trolley through customs with almost £1 million worth of heroin, acting as if he had nothing to hide. This is the story of how all three were exposed, how their plans fell apart under surveillance, and how the darker currents flowing through Britain's airports were dragged into the light. Welcome to UK crime documentaries. Let's get straight into the case. On the surface, Farzana, also reported as Farzana Kauza, a 4-year-old woman from Bradford, looked like any other mother and grandmother. To neighbors and acquaintances, she seemed firmly rooted in everyday life, raising her family, managing household responsibilities, and blending into the quiet rhythm of her community. She did not fit the stereotype of a cartel boss. She fit the image of someone you might pass in a supermarket aisle and forget moments later. But behind that unremarkable exterior, investigators would later discover a very different Farzana. She was not simply a supportive parent. She was the linchpin of a sophisticated international drug trafficking network, one that shifted huge quantities of high-purity cocaine from Mexico into the United Kingdom. While other people in her street planned school runs and shopping lists, she was planning smuggling runs and international connections. Kauza was never acting alone. Evidence later presented in court revealed she was working with figures overseas, including a contact referred to only as Uncle in Pakistan. This shadowy associate helped arrange shipments, open doors to corrupt insiders, and provide the connections needed to move drugs from one continent to another. Together, they built a system that, on paper, looked like nothing more than carefully timed family trips abroad. In reality, those flights were the backbone of a multi-million-pound criminal enterprise. Her leadership style was both calculated and chillingly personal. Many organized crime figures try to keep their immediate families at arm's length, distancing loved ones from the most dangerous parts of their operations. Farzana did the opposite. She deliberately pulled her children into the conspiracy, assigning them roles as if she were handing out family chores. Some were barely out of their teens when they were recruited. Hamza Shafiq was only 17 when the offenses took place, still legally a minor when the smuggling runs were underway. His life path was redirected long before it had properly begun, shaped not by a bad group of friends or a random wrong turn, but by his own mother's commands. His brothers and siblings, ranging from their late teens to early 30s, were each given a part to play. This wasn't a random collection of criminals. It was a structured hierarchy, built around blood ties and loyalty, with Farzana at the very top. On the surface, it looked like a close family that liked to travel together. Beneath that, it was something far more dangerous, and it all came to a head in the baggage hall at Birmingham Airport. In the next section, we'll step inside this family-turned-cartel and see exactly how each member was drawn into their mother's plan. To understand what happened at Birmingham Airport, you first have to understand the family behind it. What looked from the outside like an ordinary Bradford household was, in reality, the core of a moving, breathing trafficking machine, one where almost everyone shared the same surname and the same loyalty to the woman in charge. At the top sat Farzana Kauza. She wasn't a street dealer or a disposable courier. She was the organizer, the strategist, the person who decided who traveled, when they traveled, and what they would carry, whether they wanted to or not. Around her were her children, each with a different role, each drawn deeper into the conspiracy until there was no easy way out. Her eldest son, 3-year-old Junaid Shafiq, acted almost like a second in command. Age and experience made him a natural extension of his mother's authority. Junaid helped coordinate travel arrangements and oversee the smooth running of the operation. When suitcases needed to be intercepted, flights booked, or routes planned, Junaid was close to the center of those decisions. To outsiders, He might have looked like a son helping his mother with family trips. In reality, he was helping her move cocaine across borders. Then there was 8-year-old Mohammed Amir Shafiq. He played the role of courier, a crucial position in a plot built around airports and luggage belts. Mohammed Amir was trusted to handle the physical movement of bags, to be the person who would step off a plane, walk through the baggage hall, and leave with suitcases loaded with high-purity cocaine. His job was simple in theory. Pick up, walk out, don't get caught. In practice, every step through customs carried the weight of years in prison. 22-year-old Mohammed joined the operation at an age when many people are just starting careers, finishing studies, or settling into adult life. Instead of thinking about interviews and first jobs, he was thinking about luggage carousels, return flights, and how to look relaxed while pushing a trolley stacked with drugs. As another courier, he was exposed to the same high-risk moments, trusting in his mother's planning and the supposed safety of their routine. The youngest of the brothers involved, Hamza, was just 17 when the offenses took place. That detail struck investigators, and later the public. A boy, still legally a child, drawn into international drug trafficking not by hardened criminals in back alleys, but by the person meant to protect him, his own mother. Every run he made for the conspiracy pushed him further away from a normal future and deeper into a life that would eventually be laid out in front of a judge. But the conspiracy didn't stop with sons. Fazana's decision to involve her daughter-in-law, 7-year-old Sarah Hussein, showed just how wide she was willing to cast the net. Rather than shielding Sarah from the criminal side of the family, she pulled her into it, making her part of the wider plot. At the same time, one 9-year-old daughter, Safa Noor, became one of the youngest couriers in the operation, taking on responsibilities that carried enormous risk for someone barely into adulthood. And it wasn't only blood relatives. 36-year-old family friend, Khaled Abdul Kawi, was also brought into the fold. His involvement underscored how the group operated, tight-knit, based on trust and familiarity, but ultimately destructive. Someone on the outside might have seen them as a close community. The National Crime Agency saw a disciplined network. This was no loose, opportunistic arrangement. It was a hierarchy. At the top, Fazana issued instructions, coordinated with overseas contacts like Uncle in Pakistan, and made sure everyone knew their part. Below her, each member acted as a cog in the machine, booking trips, traveling light, collecting luggage, and walking out of airports with fortunes in cocaine hidden in plain sight. For the family, loyalty to their mother came at the cost of their freedom and their futures. For Fazana, involving those closest to her meant she could extend her reach while still appearing to live the life of an ordinary parent. What looked like simple family travel was, in fact, the engine of an international smuggling operation. In the next section, we'll step into the heart of their method, the Cancun connection, the fake city break flights, and the moment everything began to unravel under the watchful eyes of the NCA. The true power of the Causa operation didn't lie in hidden compartments or high-tech concealment. It lay in something far more ordinary: timing, routine, and the ability to blend into a crowd. On paper, it looked like nothing more than a series of short trips to nearby European cities. In reality, those mini-breaks were carefully choreographed moves in a multi-million-pound trafficking scheme. The plan began with flights that raised no suspicion at all. Members of the family would book short-haul trips to destinations like Dublin or Amsterdam, places where a quick getaway wouldn't stand out. They often traveled light, sometimes with no checked luggage at all, reinforcing the image of a brief, low-commitment trip abroad. To anyone checking their bookings, it all looked perfectly normal, but the crucial detail wasn't where they went. It was when they came back. Their return flights to Birmingham Airport were timed to land just as a long-haul flight from Cancun, Mexico, was arriving. That incoming Mexico flight carried far more than sunburned tourists and duty-free bags. Hidden in its luggage hold were suitcases packed with blocks of high-purity cocaine, loaded onto the plane by a corrupt insider on the other side of the Atlantic. In the chaos of the baggage hall, this timing became everything. Passengers from the short-haul flights and the Cancun flight spilled into the same area. Carousels spun with suitcases from different planes. In that noise and movement, the family's couriers would drift toward the belt serving the Mexico flight despite technically arriving from elsewhere. The pre-loaded cases from Cancun were their real target. Those suitcases had no legitimate owner waiting at Birmingham. No holidaymaker was standing there expecting them. They were ghosts in the system, bags that should have stood out but instead blended into the steady stream of luggage. The conspirators' job was deceptively simple. Walk up, lift the unaccompanied bags from the carousel, place them on a trolley, and walk away as if they'd just collected their own belongings. The brilliance of the method lay in its simplicity and its trust in human habit. Airports are noisy, crowded, and built on the assumption that people take the bags they checked in. Security staff aren't expected to remember every face from the boarding gate. By behaving like anyone else dressed casually, not appearing nervous, keeping a steady, relaxed pace, the couriers relied on the power of normal to shield them. Reports suggest this tactic wasn't unique to the Causa clan. International trafficking networks have used similar carousel interception methods before. What made this case stand out was how consistently the family executed it. Between August and November 2024, the system appears to have been tested across at least 5 smuggling runs, each one fine-tuning the pattern, each one reinforcing their confidence that the routine worked. But while they perfected their timing, someone else was studying it too. The National Crime Agency and airport security teams had begun to notice repeat travel patterns, familiar faces on overlapping flights, and movements in the baggage hall that didn't match where people were supposed to have flown from. Slowly, quietly, a picture formed. By November 11th, the day it all came crashing down, officers were ready. They were in place as the flight from Cancun touched down, and as members of the Causa group blended into the arrivals hall. CCTV later showed how calmly the couriers positioned themselves near the Mexico carousel, waiting for bags that, officially, couldn't possibly belong to them. 6 suitcases packed with cocaine arrived on that flight. One by one, they were lifted from the belt, placed on trolleys, and pushed through the terminal. Cameras captured the group leaving the baggage hall, wheeling the heavy cases out toward the airport forecourt, heading for waiting vehicles as if the plan had once again gone perfectly. But this time, the mask of normality fell apart. Just as the group began loading the luggage into cars, NCA officers moved in. Within moments, 6 suspects were surrounded and arrested on the spot. All 6 suitcases were seized before they left the airport grounds. Inside, investigators uncovered 180 kilograms of cocaine, tightly compressed and wrapped for distribution. The numbers told their own story: a wholesale value of around £5 million, and an estimated street value of roughly £14.4 million, once broken down into smaller deals. It wasn't just a successful interception, it was the dismantling of a family-led trafficking pipeline. Photographs later released showed the bricks of cocaine stacked together, a stark visual of what this operation had risked everything to move. For the NCA, this was proof that even the most ordinary airport routines can hide enormous criminal enterprises. But the Causa family weren't the only ones to underestimate Birmingham Airport. Before we return to their sentencing, another case needs to be told, one where a single wrap of heroin in a carry-on bag exposed a far deadlier world waiting back home. February 2016, Birmingham Airport. While most passengers focused on boarding calls and seat numbers, security staff at the departure gates were doing what they always do: scanning faces, checking bags, and watching for anything that didn't quite fit. Among the travelers preparing to board a flight to Pakistan was a man who, at first glance, gave them no particular reason to look twice. Majid Hussain. He appeared like any other passenger, holding his hand luggage, waiting to start his journey. But when officers inspected his carry-on bag, the ordinary moment snapped. Inside, they found a wrap of heroin. No clever hiding place, no elaborate concealment in food packets or electronics. It was simply there, in his hand luggage. That small detail immediately raised a far bigger question. What kind of man is careless enough or confident enough to carry heroin so plainly through airport security? Airport staff raised the alarm and detained Hussain on the spot. What could have been dismissed as a user-level amount was treated as something more serious because of where it was found and how it was carried. Investigators began to suspect that Hussain wasn't a nervous addict sneaking drugs onto a flight. He was someone with connections, someone who felt bold enough to treat the airport like his own corridor. Within hours, what started as a routine stop had escalated into a full-scale investigation. If the wrap of heroin was the loose thread, the search of his home was the moment the entire tapestry came apart. Officers obtained warrants and moved quickly to Hussain's address on Nansen Road in Saltley. Inside that house, they found the true scale of the man behind the carry-on. In his bedroom, under his bed, lay a suitcase that told the real story. Inside it was a kilo of heroin and 4 kilos of cocaine, together estimated to have a street value of around £250,000. That alone confirmed that he was no small-time player. This was stock ready for distribution, a supply line feeding addiction and violence far beyond the confines of his home. But the drugs were only one part of the picture. The search turned up something even more chilling: weapons. Investigators found a semi-automatic handgun, fully capable of lethal use, along with 27 rounds of live ammunition. This was not a man who only dealt in powder. This was someone ready to protect his trade or enforce his will with deadly force if needed. Alongside the firearm, officers uncovered a stun gun disguised as a mobile phone, an innocuous-looking device designed to incapacitate without drawing immediate suspicion. An air pistol was also seized. Layered together, these items painted a portrait of a dealer operating in a world where threats were met with violence and disputes were settled with weapons, not words. Then came the money. Around £300,000 in cash was discovered, bundled, and hidden within the property. This was the financial footprint of a thriving drug operation. Thousands of small, destructive transactions condensed into stacks of notes. For investigators, that cash didn't just represent profit. It represented lives damaged by addiction and communities harmed by the trade Hussein helped drive. Any doubt about his role vanished. The man who had walked through the airport with a single wrap of heroin was no unlucky courier caught making a foolish mistake. He was a well-armed, well-financed dealer at the center of a dangerous network. The arrest at the airport had simply yanked away his cover. When the case reached Birmingham Crown Court in August 2016, prosecutors laid out the evidence piece by piece. The heroin at the airport, the stash of cocaine and heroin under the bed, the handgun, the disguised stun gun, the ammunition, the air pistol, and the £300,000 in cash. Hussein chose to plead guilty on the first day of his trial. The charges included possession of a prohibited firearm, possession of a disguised firearm, possession of ammunition, possession of Class A drugs with intent to supply, and possession of criminal property. By admitting the offenses, he avoided a drawn-out trial, but the weight of the evidence was already crushing. During sentencing, Judge Patrick Thomas QC described the mixture of guns and drugs as a toxic combination, highlighting just how dangerous that pairing was for the wider public. Hussein was sentenced to 12 years in prison. Yet even that wasn't the end. In December 2017, under the Proceeds of Crime Act, the courts went after his profits. Birmingham Crown Court ruled that he had benefited by hundreds of thousands of pounds. He was ordered to repay £295,000 within 3 months, or face an additional 3 years in prison. A further £33,000 in criminal benefit remained on record to be recovered if and when more assets were found. One wrap of heroin in a carry-on bag had blown open an entire empire. But if Majid Hussein's downfall began with a careless mistake, the next man at Birmingham Airport tried something far bolder. Calmly walking through with nearly 18 kilograms of heroin, guided by WhatsApp messages telling him to remain tension-free. By November 2021, Birmingham Airport had already proven to be a place where calm faces could hide violent networks, and quiet travelers could be carrying lives' worth of harm in their bags. Yet once again, the familiar rhythm of arrivals and checks was interrupted, this time by a man whose composure was as striking as the value of the narcotics hidden in his luggage. His name was Mohammed Udzaya Rashid, a 35-year-old from Oldham in Greater Manchester. He arrived at Birmingham after flying from Sialkot in Pakistan via Dubai. To anyone watching him move through the terminal, he looked like countless other passengers returning from a long trip abroad. No dramatic gestures, no obvious signs of panic, just a man pushing his bags, heading toward customs. But border force officers directed Rashid into a secondary search area. There, the illusion of normality shattered. His checked-in luggage was opened, and inside, officers discovered multiple tightly wrapped packages. Forensic analysis would later reveal almost 18 kilograms of heroin with an exceptionally high purity level, between 66% and 71%. On the street, this single shipment could have been worth more than £900,000. Rashid's initial reaction wasn't shock at what had been found. It was denial. Confronted with the heroin, he insisted the bags weren't his. When that claim fell apart under the weight of boarding records and baggage tags directly linking him to the luggage, He shifted his story. The drugs, he claimed, must have been planted without his knowledge. It was a familiar story to investigators, couriers trying to distance themselves from the product the moment it's exposed. But phones don't lie as easily as people do. When officers examined Rashid's mobile, they uncovered WhatsApp messages that told a very different story. Among the everyday chats and contacts was a thread with a man referred to simply as Brother, a handler believed to be based in Pakistan. Throughout Rashid's journey, Brother had been in touch, guiding and reassuring him as he moved from one airport to another. One message stood out. As Rashid approached security, clearly nervous about whether he'd make it through, Brother sent him a simple instruction: remain tension-free. God will be generous. It was meant to soothe his nerves, to steady his walk, to help him slip through unnoticed. Instead, it became chilling evidence that he was not an unwitting victim, but an active participant in a carefully managed smuggling operation. For the National Crime Agency, those messages were critical. They didn't just show Rashid's involvement, they revealed the structure behind him, the handlers abroad, the coordinated movements, the reliance on human couriers to carry fortunes in narcotics across borders. Rashid was not a lone opportunist. He was one link in a chain. By May 2022, Rashid stood at Birmingham Crown Court and pleaded guilty to importing Class A drugs. His calm demeanor at the airport had not saved him from the reality of the evidence. The court sentenced him to 9 years in prison, and his case became another warning used by the NCA to underline a simple truth. The promise of fast money in the drug trade is almost always overshadowed by the certainty of eventual capture and punishment. And this brings us back to the family who tried to turn normal airport travel into the backbone of a cocaine pipeline. When the Causa family and their associate finally faced Birmingham Crown Court in late 2024, the scale of their crimes was matched by the severity of their sentences. At the center stood 4-year-old ringleader, Fazana Causa, for orchestrating multiple smuggling runs, recruiting family members, and coordinating with overseas contacts. She was sentenced to 13 years and 4 months in prison. Her eldest son, 3-year-old Junaid Shafiq, who helped coordinate travel and operations, received 10 years and 9 months. 28-year-old courier, Mohammed Amir Shafiq, was sentenced to 8 years and 9 months. 22-year-old Ume Muhammad received 8 years and 1 month for his role as another courier in the conspiracy. 19-year-old Safa Noor, one of the youngest to be drawn into her mother's scheme, was jailed for 7 years and 2 months. Daughter-in-law, 7-year-old Sarah Hussein, was given a 2-year prison sentence, suspended for 2 years, spared immediate custody, but living under the weight of a conviction that will follow her for life. The only non-family member, 6-year-old friend of the clan, Khalid Abdul Kawi, was handed 10 years and 9 months in prison. As for Hamza, who was just 17 when the smuggling runs took place, his case was handled separately because of his age. By the time of the trial, he had turned 18, and according to the Crown Prosecution Service, his sentencing was scheduled for October 2025, meaning no final outcome had yet been reported at the time. 3 different stories. One airport, a mother who built a cartel out of her own family, a dealer undone by a single wrap of heroin in his hand luggage, a courier told to remain tension-free while he pushed nearly £1 million worth of heroin through customs. Together, they show how Britain's airports can become crossroads not just for travelers, but for criminal empires. And for the moment, everything falls apart. What do you think about these cases and the sentences each individual received? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this breakdown insightful, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next case here on UK Crime Documentaries.